what is your legacy? And part of that is what I mentioned when I first started talking this morning, is that the Thanksgiving time of year, we start reflecting on our lives and people who are in our lives and what we're thankful for, and the relationships that we have, and so on. And this past weekend was a two memorial services, celebrations of life for Peter Magadini. And Peter Magadini was a world famous drummer and educator. He played drums for Diana Ross. He played drums for George Duke. He's got a pretty long list of things that he's done. A lot of drumming instructional books that he wrote, many of which revolved around polyrhythms. So he was kind of the guy for that. And so I met Peter Magadini about 3 years ago, and I was going to talk about that. But unfortunately, Peter passed away in August, about mid-August. I guess he had some medical issues, went in, and they found out that he had a really aggressive cancer. And his wife told me that he lived a month and a day from the time the doctor told him that he had this cancer, and his days were very limited. So that was a sad thing, and my relationship with Peter was awesome, and he was a really great friend and a really great mentor, and somebody that I corresponded with and saw frequently. So how that happened was really, really cool, and I've been thinking about that a lot over the weekend, where people were sharing stories about Peter. So 3 years ago, Thanksgiving week, I got an email from a guy named Peter Magadini, and it said by and large that it just introduced who he was, said, he had been the drummer for Diana Ross, and a little bit of his resume, and then he said he was in town visiting, and he Google searched drum teachers for Boise, and I'm one of the top 3 that pop up when you Google search drum lessons for the Boise area. So that at that time it was me, Pat Flaherty. Many of you know Pat Flaherty. Pat Flaherty's been around for a long, long time. He's since retired from teaching. And then Lucas Ventura. And I don't know how involved Lucas is in the community of drummers and such, but I do know that he's really good at what he does. So we were the top 3. So Peter had reached out to all 3 of us and wanted to meet us individually. So 3 years ago was 2020, and the whole COVID thing was in full force. So when he came over, he immediately asked if he had to wear a stupid mask, which I said no. And so he was really thankful that I was kind of on the same wavelength as he was regarding those things. And it felt comfortable immediately. But Peter came over, sat in the control room for 3 hours, just talking drums, talking about our experiences, getting to know each other. And there was no stalled conversation, moments of long pausing or anything. It was just conversation just kept rolling and getting exciting. And of course I researched who he was before he came over, and I was really pleased to meet him and start a friendship. And he was really encouraging to me as a drummer and as a teacher, and he had me tell him what my process of teaching was, especially with new students. And good morning, Gary, Jeff, Dustin, James, everybody that's here. So he was asking me about my process of teaching, and he really liked my philosophies in teaching and what I felt was important for students to learn and to begin their whole journey as becoming a drummer. And Peter was living in Chicago at the time. The whole reason he was here is that his son moved to Meridian, And so they were here visiting for Thanksgiving, and I thought it was super cool that this guy with this resume, he just was super curious, like, what the environment was here for drum teaching and for drumming and the music community at large. He would just really wanted to know, and he was really interested in those things. And that alone just blew me away, that this total stranger with this, extraordinary resume was reaching out to somebody like myself and wanted to hang out. And that was like just this awesome example of what a person's character could be. And it was really moving. So a year, over the next year, Peter and I had Skyped video back and forth a handful of times just to say hi. It was really cool. He sent me this book. This is one of his instructional books, How to Play the Drum Set. And this book is really cool because I'm not giving a drum lesson right now, but I'm just letting you know that it's a really great book for drummers of all skill level, because I think it goes over some of the stuff that might get missed along the way. It's a really thorough book. It's really great. Here's a picture of Peter, if I can try to. It's black and white, but so there's Peter, and he sent this to me and autographed it from November 16th of 2020 is when, so every day when I grab this book and I'm teaching, I always see this, and it means more now to me than it did, because he's gone. My buddy, my friend, my mentor is gone, and so now this is super special. So at any rate, a year later, after meeting him, I get a phone call, and he's, "Hey Fred, it's Peter Magadini. Hey Peter, what's going on? Hey, I got a surprise for you." "Oh yeah, what's that?" "I moved to Boise." And I just started laughing. I thought it was super cool. Here's this amazing drummer who was living in a nice part of Chicago, and but when he was here visiting before, he and his wife just fell in love with the area, and plus his son had moved here, and they're getting older. Peter was 80 years old. You wouldn't get that from how he spoke and so on, but it was like, wow, that's really cool. He said, yeah. Halen and I are going to have you and Mary over for dinner as soon as our kitchen table arrives. And then so I was messaging, and he bought this new house and so on, but the kitchen table wasn't arriving, so we went over and we had dinner anyway. We sat around the island in his kitchen and just getting to know each other better and better, and so he was asking me about the local music scene, and of course Peter was still teaching drum lessons. He taught drum lessons all over the world while he was using Skype and Zoom. James is here weighing in. Let's see if I can get his full comment up here. James is saying Peter Magadini was one of the first, if not the first, to break down polyrhythms. That's the first I heard of the man. I can't see the rest of your comment here yet, James, but yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. I had not heard of Peter until he had emailed me. But James Harrison here, another drumming friend of mine who's been really encouraging me along the way too as well. These people come in your life, and there's a lot of value in those relationships. So leading up to this whole legacy thing. So I would, we were over there, and he was asking me about the local music scene, and Peter was really into jazz. Jazz was his main thing. Of course, playing with George Duke Trio and those kind of things. So the only place that I could think of off the top of my head was Chandler's. And so he went down to Chandler's and started making friends, and I think he sat in. He may have done more than sit in with groups, I don't know. But making friends, and then he ended up becoming the drum set teacher at Boise State. That was his most recent job that he had. And so here's this guy that just was like really infectious in his love of drumming and his love of teaching and his love of people. And so Friday night, Boise State Bronco Percussion Program put on a concert at the Morrison Center to honor Peter, and it was really, really great. It was really awesome. I sat right behind Peter's wife. Funny thing is, when I walk in and I saw Helene, she grabbed me and hugged me, and then she, when she was done hugging me, she says, "Is Mary coming?" Everybody wants to know where Mary is. I'm glad you're here, but where's Mary? I said she couldn't make it Friday night because of other obligations, but Mary went with me to the other thing they had for him on Saturday. But Boise State Bronco Percussion Program did a phenomenal job of putting this concert together. The Dr. Kramer Milan is the guy who organized that whole thing. And then they had video testimonials sent in that they would play in between the pieces that they were performing. One of which was Steve Smith, Steve Smith, the former drummer of Journey, who was a student of Peter's, and I think that they worked the polyrhythm stuff. That was what Steve Smith was really interested in, and so he became a long-time student of Peter's and a great friend. So those are the kind of people that Peter would work with. And Peter told me, when he was teaching from his house here in Boise, which he also did in Chicago, his main core of drum students that he had were people like myself who are already pretty well established with their instrument, but were just looking to gain these advantages in their playing in smaller areas that were more focused things. I was doing these drum covers every week, and I did them for like almost 2 years. That has slowed considerably because I've got other things going on, but every time I would post one, Peter would either call me or message me and say, "Man, these are great. I just love how your arms move. I love the way that you're playing and the energy that you have." And he thought that was really cool. So every time I do one, he would message or call me. And then every once in a while I'll do interviews, because my social media presence is growing more and more on YouTube. So I would have other drummers who were doing similar things, and part of their thing is to interview drummers, and so I've been a part of those, and I would send those to Peter. And the first one I sent him, I didn't hear anything from him for a while, and then I got a phone call one day from Peter, and he said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about this interview I watched?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he gave me all these like tips on how to be better in these interviews. Which was awesome. There wasn't a criticism. It was just like, "Hey, I've done a lot of these, and there's opportunity for you to take more advantage of these situations if you did these things." And so that was just, what a great person to have in your life. It was so awesome. So Friday, like I said, they had these video testimonials that were playing. Steve Smith from Journey was on there. Mike Johnson of Mike's Lessons Online. If you guys don't know who Mike Johnson is, he's a drummer like myself, but teaches online worldwide. He, if I'm not mistaken, he may be the #1 online drum instructor. Another big one that you might hear about is Drumeo. So Drumeo would probably be like Mike Johnson's biggest competitors. And then he had other students that were had sent in videos, one of which was from Australia. And the one from Australia was really, really touching, kind of a heavy moment for everybody, but just another way of showing what kind of person Peter Magadini was, is that this person from Australia had started taking drum lessons with Peter. And I don't remember what the time difference is, but whatever time Peter was teaching here, it was 7 a.m. in Australia. So this student had to get up super early to do these drum lessons with Peter Magadini at 7 a.m. and be awake and ready to go. And he had taken, I can't remember if he said, somewhere between like 3 and 5 lessons with Peter. I think Peter's schedule was like an hour plus lesson every two weeks. And so that's kind of how he operated. And this guy's telling this story of, he was up and ready for his lesson, and Peter called him and said, hey, I've got to cancel today. I've got some medical things I need to take care of, and so can we push this back? A few days later, I'll be in touch with you on when we can do that. So the guy in Australia said, yeah, no problem. So a few days later, I think he got an email or something from Peter and said, hey, let's arrange to do this lesson on this day at this time. And the guy was saying in his videos, like, man, the time that Peter was offering was really inconvenient for him because of whatever he had going on, but he felt something else in him saying, no, you should really do this and either push off these other commitments I have and do this thing with Peter. And so I said, yeah, and he said, this time we're not going to do it through Skype, we're going to do it through FaceTime on their iPhones. And he's like, okay. So got ready to do his lesson, they got a connection, and this guy from Australia said, here's Peter. To back up, just like he was saying, can we do it on this date? And the guy responded to Peter and said, man, I got all this stuff going on, can we do it next week? And Peter responded and he said, I'm afraid there's not going to be a next week for me. And that moment was really, really heavy, the way that he explained that. And he said, okay, so I'll do this lesson. And so when he got on FaceTime, here's Peter laying in bed looking sickly, according to the guy in Australia. And he said, hey, we're going to do this lesson. And whatever book that they were working out of, Peter had heavily stressed to him, the author of this book is somebody that I worked with, and so I want to finish walking you through this book before I'm not able to. And so this student from Australia said, Peter spent all this time on the phone with them on FaceTime, and they went through every single page of that book. They finished going through the book, at least so that Peter could explain to him, what they needed to do. And this is just such a crazy thing that, at least in my mind, that Peter did, is that Peter passed away like 2 days after that. So here he is from his deathbed, if you want to call it that, doing a lesson with another drummer halfway around the world, and going through this, like the care this man had for his students was just extraordinary, and it was like really, really cool. It was great. So then Saturday night they had another memorial celebration of life with some closer friends and some friends that had come in from out of town. One which was Robert Hirschman, who was the bass player for the George Duke Trio. So I talked to he and his wife quite a bit at that gathering, and Chuck Smith was there, and he played piano for a while, and there was more video testimonial, more from family this time, and they had different people around the room get up and talk about him. I did not, because I can't handle those situations very well, so I declined. But it was really extraordinary to see the impact that Peter Magadini had on the Boise scene in the just under 2 years that he was living here. So it was really cool to see how his legacy is impacting so many people. And so when I talk about legacy, one thing that came to mind was this other drummer, Dom Famularo, who died recently, also of cancer. Another huge educator in the drum community. I wasn't really aware of who he was. I knew of him, but I didn't really pay attention to anything other than he would do some interviewing with other drummers. Like I've watched a ton of Kenny Aronoff stuff. So there was a Kenny Aronoff interview that Dom Famularo had done. And then when Dom passed away, then my news feed on social media just blew up with all these drummers talking about Dom Famularo. So I started going down the YouTube rabbit hole, watching videos of his, and just how infectious this guy was. Very similar to how Peter Magadini is. And one thing that Dom Famularo had done was this Drumeo. He had done many Drumeo things, but this one in particular was the guys from Drumeo were doing a remembrance of Dom Famularo, and so they were showing different clips. Some of them behind the scenes clips, like stuff that had been edited out, but one was he was talking to Jared Falk, who runs Drumeo, and just the cameras were rolling, but it wasn't anything that they used, but it was this clip they showed of him going, Jared was saying something to the effect of like, isn't it crazy we're going to do this video and people 50 years from now are still going to be watching it? And Dom Famularo was talking like, amazing, imagine if there was videos of George Lawrence Stone, who wrote Stick Control. What if there was videos of him still floating around, that you could watch? And they were just talking about like, long after I'm gone, this stuff is still going to exist. This information still has the ability to move people in a great direction. And it was just, so I was thinking about that. I was thinking about everything that Peter Magadini had done and his effect on my life personally. And it being Thanksgiving week, so you have all these thoughts popping in your head, and just realizing like how fortunate we are to have some of these relationships with people, especially through music. Robert Hirschman, who was the bass player from George Duke, Mary and I were talking to his wife for a long time, and she was talking about, they would have never come to Boise ever. Like, it would never been on their radar, except they came to, support this remembrance of Peter Magadini. And she was just blown away by, because they're from Los Angeles, and they've lived all over the world doing music. But she was just talking about how the arts bring so many people together from so many different walks of life, and just the culture of that, and how special it is. It was really cool to just have a conversation with somebody, revolving around those things, and the kind of deep conversation that you can have with a total stranger because you have this thing in common, which was just extraordinary. So, talking about legacy, I had to look up what the definition of it was, because I think it means different things to different people. So the dictionary, when I said legacy, what is it? The number one thing was an amount of money left to somebody, like, you would leave an inheritance in a will to a family member, perhaps. That was the number one definition. I think it means more than that. So then the number two definition was legacy is a long-lasting impact of particular events in a person's life. And so that, to me, is a closer definition of what legacy would mean to me. Yes, James, same here. James says, most of my relationships and friends are through music. Yeah, same. And, the longer that we do this, this music thing, the longer that we're involved with it, the more, like, I look at James Harrison here, and James Harrison being an instructor as well, and all the time he spent at Boise State teaching, just the amount of students that James has been involved with is a lot. Probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of people he's had some kind of influence on, and on top of that, just playing in bands. All the stuff that James had been involved with bands is, look at those people that you come across. It's pretty crazy, the amount of people that we know from, and I realize that myself. I was looking at my student roster, because every year I keep, well, not every year, but every time I have like a new student come in, I keep my old schedule, because I'm just curious like who the names are. So a year ago, I looked at the people who were taking lessons from me. Half of those people had stopped taking lessons or moved on for whatever reason. Like, usually when the high school kids graduate high school, I don't see them again. Not as students anyway, because they go off to college. So I have like 25 new students that I'm seeing this year that I didn't know last year. So that's the turnover of students I have. I still have like 15 to 18 that have been with me for several years, but there's like almost half of the turnover. It's just crazy to think, like, I've been involved with all of those people, and students and their parents and so on. It just spreads so quickly. It's pretty amazing. So that number 2 definition, like, a legacy is a long-lasting impact of particular events in a person's life. Well, speaking of students, I have another student whose parents have a business of coaching. I think it's called Master Life Coaching. They deal a lot in real estate and finance. And it's so odd that I would be thinking of all these things, and the dad, Joe Moffat, had posted a video yesterday, or maybe the day before, talking about legacy. And he said the same thing. Like, a lot of people say legacy is the amount of money or something that you would leave behind for your children. But he said legacy is not what it's not what's left to them, but what's left in them. And I thought that was a pretty profound statement. Like, your legacy is not what you're leaving to somebody, but what you're leaving in somebody. And that's pretty heavy stuff. And I think, anytime somebody in your life passes away, you think about your own mortality and where you are with your life, and I think that's a pretty natural thing for all of us to do because of the impact that people have on us. I see that my sister Susan is on here, and I've talked about her before. Like, she's followed her dream of having this Arabian horse breeding program called Ohadi Arabians. And so when I listen to my sister talk about her business, yeah, it's a business, but it's there's so much relationship in it, just like in music. And the people that she knows all over the country who she's done this stuff with. When I talk about horses and breeding and stuff, I'm talking way beyond my scope of knowledge. So if you want to know more, you could bug her. But it's pretty cool, like, what she's building up and what's going to be her legacy, through her horse friends. What do you call that? Equestrian? I don't know. I might not even say that word right. So that, I was, when this other guy said it's not what's left to them, but what's left in them, I was thinking about that video from Dom Famularo, because in one interview I saw with him, he said, I'm just talking about drums, and it's an extension of who we are and our personality, and just the sheer joy that he had about drumming, and seeing the same kind of light in someone's eyes, like Peter Magadini's, the same thing. He's like, Dom Famulero was talking about, I could leave this interview and I could cross the street and get hit by a car, but I'm okay knowing that with all my students and all the relationships I've had, there's a part of me that lives on through them. And just talking about like the spread of that is pretty awesome. My sister says relationships are super important, and ha ha. Ha ha, probably because I don't know what I'm talking about with horses. Yes. Your interactions leave an impression. What impression do you leave behind? Yeah, and I was talking to my son Christian about this because I was telling him about the concert I went to, and at the concert there's a lot of college students that are there, which are the same age as my son. And Christian didn't go. He didn't really know Peter. He had met him a few times, but there are a lot of Boise State percussion students who are friends of Christian, or at least know of him. And so when I was there, I was running across these students that kept coming up to me, introducing themselves. Hey, you're Christian's dad. You're Christian's dad, right? You're a drummer, right? You're Christian's dad. Like, that was the question over and over. You teach drum lessons. You're Christian's dad. So that's kind of cool because, my son's so involved with music as well. My whole family is, Mary's involved with music, and I think we have a really unique thing here in the Fisher household, because my wife is a full-time musician, I'm a full-time musician, my kids are involved with music, and it's nothing that we forced on our children, but it's just our life. It's pretty awesome. Greg, as artists as well as teachers, we reach many more people than we are even aware. Yes, you're 100% correct on that. There was this saying that I meant to write down, and Greg, you just made me think of it, is that be careful in how you act and what you say, because you never know who you're going to be influencing through, and it doesn't have to be a direct contact with somebody. It could be somebody's just observing you, from across the restaurant, or across the venue, or whatever you're doing. I had owned my own landscaping company for a long time, and the name of my company was on the side of my vehicles along with my phone number. And so when I had employees, I had a couple situations where people would call me and start chewing me out because of how I was driving. I wasn't actually driving. I had an employee driving one of my vehicles, and because of how they were acting, maybe they're telling people they're number one, or whatever the case is. So they were representing my company, and they were representing me, and so even though I wasn't the one who personally did anything, I was still the responsible party. That was a reflection back on me. And so, yeah, when you're driving around town and you're acting a certain way, how does that reflect on you? It's great food for thought, for sure. And I'm not a shiny example of how a person acts, because I'm a human being. I've definitely had my moments of frustration, as I'm sure all of you have as well, where things are not going your way, or you're being wronged in some way, and you're going to let people know that that's not okay. But I will say though that I've seen, talking about observing people. Hey Chip, I'm looking forward to the deck show today. I always love watching you guys talk about that stuff. It's so great. It's so relatable, especially to everything that I've experienced. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with Chip Ritter here later today, and Bart Robley, Rick Stojak, and Jeremy Steinkohler. Yeah, those guys have a show, Drummers Education Connection. If you guys don't know what that is, find it on YouTube or Facebook here. They do a show every Tuesday. That's Tuesday. It's 11 o'clock, I think, for them, but it's noon here for us. So, yeah, absolutely, Chip. Looking forward to it. Someday maybe I'll get to join you guys, because you guys are. It's another great thing. It's so awesome. But anyway, I'm inviting myself. Yeah. So, what's your legacy? When you're gone, what are people going to say about you? And I, like I said, when somebody passes away that was close to you, you start thinking about your own mortality. And I think that some teachers, like, maybe this is a college, I didn't go to college, but I've heard about it, like, where you've been asked to write your own obituary or your eulogy, or what are people going to say about you once you're gone? And Chip, I don't know if you've been here this whole time, but I was talking about Dom Familero and Peter Magadini, who I was close with. Peter Magadini. Yeah, these drummers that just had this effect on us, and what their legacy is quite extraordinary. So, Greg, it blew me away a few years ago. I met one of my prior students playing in a touring band at Uproar Festival. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, see, guys, I apologize. I want to see this See More thing, and then I never make it work. But yeah, I'll go back and finish reading everything you have to say. Yeah, it's, Greg, I too have, my studio's open during the day, and so I could be in here teaching, and somebody just walk in, and oftentimes I'll have a former student come by and just say hi, which is super cool to have that. They're just popping in like, hey, I haven't seen you in a year. I just wanted to check in, and they're doing whatever it is they're doing, and it's pretty cool. Many of them, like you said, have gone off to continue playing music either in college, or they started a band and they're out, slugging it out in a van, which I've experienced too. So it's very relatable. It's good stuff. But yeah, so that's the nuts and bolts of what I wanted to talk about today. So what is your legacy? Yeah. Now I'm just talking in circles. Oh, so let's wrap this up. But guys, thanks for hanging out. You saw that I posted 20 drum beats that every drummer should know. I did that for 20 days. Yesterday was number 20. That means I got to come up with more material starting today. It's funny, talking about relationships and conversations that you have with total strangers. I watch YouTube videos and shorts on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook of other drummers playing. Some of them are amazing. I don't know how these people play double bass that fast. I don't know how some people play like they do, the gospel chops thing. That's not part of what I do. But it blows my mind. And then you see other drummers that, aren't quite up to snuff, so to speak. But I would never comment on those people's videos and criticize them or lash out or make fun of them for what they were doing, because I don't know their situation. Sometimes there's people that are out there drumming that have handicaps. You find out later that, if the camera panned back, they're playing from a wheelchair or something. And these people they have a love for the instrument, and so they're doing what they do. And anytime you post stuff on social media, regardless of what level it is, I think it's pretty brave to put yourself out there. All that to say, though, most of the comments that I got were really positive. I'm looking forward to the next one. Suggestions like, hey, can you show me how you're playing your hi-hat? can you show me 16th note rhythms on this kick drum now? You know, because these 20 drum beats are all 8th note based. But then I would have, I got a funny comment yesterday, like, the beat's cool, but too bad you look constipated. I burst out laughing when I read that, and I just politely deleted it. But you know, and then you got other people like, these are too simple. These are, you know, and I just ignore those people. This, like, whatever. If they got it figured out, great for them. But yeah, just be careful in your words. That coming from the guy that's like really opinionated on some things. But at any rate, you guys have an awesome day. You know, my household is still asleep. I guarantee you that nobody is up because it's we're on break. But maybe I should go wrestle them up because we do need to prepare for company on Thursday. So that would be good. Hey, Gary, happy holidays to you too. Gary, we talk about this every single week, but it's time to catch up and get some coffee, don't you think? I think we should do that. Plus, I know that you've been to Nashville recently, and I'd love to hear about that stuff as well. So, guys, have an awesome day. I'm going to stop talking. My throat is, as you can probably hear, that's what it sounds like when you breathe a lot of destroyed leaves. So there you go. Greg says, have a great day, and I hope you and yours have. Yeah, you too, my friend. And Greg, you know, I invite anybody watching, if you're ever over in Southwest Boise and want to check out the studio and hang, just let me know, man. I love having guests and talking shop and all of those fun things. So you guys have an awesome day. Have a great Thanksgiving. Hug your family and friends. Say I love you. I love you. I love all of you. And there you go. See you later.